Okay, welcome everyone for another video lecture series in mathematics. So today's discussion would be on sets and set operations. Okay, so let's start with the definition of a set. A set is a well-defined collection of objects. A set is made up of elements. If we let S be a set, and if A is one of the elements in set S, then we say that A is an element of S. The symbol here represents the symbol for element or membership of A in S. If A is not a member of S, then we write A is not a member of S, or A is not an element of S. Now, let's try to consider some of the important sets in mathematics. Let's have the first one. We have N as the set of natural counting numbers. The natural counting numbers starts from 1, 2, 3, and so on. Capital letter Z represents the set of integers. Capital letter Q represents the rational numbers. Q prime is the set of irrational numbers. Set R is the set of real numbers. Set I is the set of imaginary numbers, and finally set C is the set of complex numbers. Remember, again, these are important sets in mathematics. We could also make our own sets, collect some objects and define them in a given set, such as the ones that appear here in the given examples. So for example, if we try to define the set L as the set of all letters in the English alphabet, based on this description, we know that the elements of L are the letters A, B, C, and so on, up to the last letter of the English alphabet, the letter Z. Also, for example, if we define capital letter V, set V as the set of vowels in the English alphabet, we know that the members or the elements of set V are the letters A, E, I, O, and U. Set C is the set of consonants of the English alphabet, so we know that if we remove set V from set L, what would be left is the set of consonants, the letters B, C, D, F, G, and the rest of the consonants of the English alphabet. Also, we could define a set of numbers such as the one here defined as set E, the set of all positive even integers. Set O, we could define this as the set of all positive odd integers. Set W, for example, is the set containing the days of the week. So we know that the elements of W would be the days Monday through Sunday. Set D, for example, if we set D as the set containing the digits of the decimal number system, we know that the set D would contain the following digits from 0 up to 9. Okay, so again, so suppose we have set P as the set of distinct letters in the name Philippines. We know based on this description that the set P would contain the letters P, H, I, L, N, E, and S. Okay, so let's now proceed with what we call subsets. Subsets, given a set set A is said to be a subset of set S if every element of A is also an element of S. This is denoted by this symbol, and this is read as A is a subset of S. Now take note again for the definition, subset A is a subset of S if every element of A is also an element of S. Now, comparable sets, if you are given two sets, for example, set A and set B, set A is said to be comparable to set B if A is a subset of B. Equal sets. Equal sets, if you have two sets A and B are said to be equal if they contain the same exact elements. Then we write A is equal to B, or otherwise, if at least one of the elements in one of these sets does not appear in the other set, then we say that the two sets are not equal, and we symbolize it such as A is not equal to B. Now we consider proper and improper subset. The subset with the symbol, earlier we have introduced that this symbol represents what we call a subset of S, but taken strictly, this is actually read as A is an improper subset of S. The improper subset of S includes the possibility that A is equal to S. That means all the elements in A could be exactly the elements in S, so such that A is equal to S, and that means that A includes the possibility that A is actually less than or equal to S. In this case, again, we say that A is an improper subset of S. If A is a subset of S, but A is not equal to S, meaning that the elements of A are actually less than the actual elements of S, then we say that A is properly contained in S, or that A is a proper subset of S, denoted by this symbol. The difference between the improper subset symbol and the proper subset symbol is that the proper subset symbol does not have a bar underneath. Okay, so let's have the set builder notation. A set is defined by its elements. A set can be defined by either listing or what we call the roster method, where the elements of the set are listed down and separated by commas written inside curly brackets. A set can also be defined by what we call the rule method, where the elements are described by giving a characterizing property of the elements in the set. If, for example, if we let X be the elements of a set, and we let P of X be the characterizing property of X, then we let the notation, this symbol here, be the rule that defines the set. This symbol here is read as the set of all X such that the statement P of X about X is true, or simply the set of all X such that P of X. This notation is what we call the set builder notation. Again, the set builder notation can be used to define a set by either listing or the roster method, or by a rule or what we call the rule method. Now take note, oftentimes you encounter this symbol a sort of reversed E, and this symbol here a sort of inverted A. These symbols are called quantifiers. The quantifier, the sort of inverted A, we call this symbol the universal quantifier. The universal quantifier is used to represent the phrases for all, for any, or for every. The quantifier having this symbol, the sort of reversed E, is called the existential quantifier. The existential quantifier is used to represent the phrases for some, or there exists a, or there exists an. Thus, the phrase all X such that P of X can be written as all X such that P of X, wherein we have used or replaced the symbol or the statement for all X or all X using the universal quantifier. While the phrase for some X such that P of X or there exists X such that P of X can be written using the existential quantifier. Now, if it is inconvenient or impossible to list down all the elements of a set, then we can make use of the rule method to define a given set. Now let's try to apply this using the set of examples that was presented earlier. Okay, so for example, if we let the first set L, defined earlier as the set of all letters in the English alphabet, if we're going to use the rule method for L, then we can write the rule such as small letter L or all L such that L is a letter of the English alphabet. Now set V, since set V is the set of all vowels of the English alphabet and it has only 5 elements, then it is more convenient to list down all the elements instead of defining a lengthy statement for the rule method. The same goes with set C. Now, either way, set C can be defined using the rule method or the roster method, but in this case, we have listed down all the list of the set of consonants in the English alphabet. Therefore, we have made use of the roster method in this case. Now, set E is defined as the set of even integers. Now, we can make use of a set of symbols, combination of symbols, to represent the members or the elements of E, such as the one that appears here. We have here the set E as equal to 2x, such that x is an element of the natural counting numbers. Now, if we're going to look at the elements of set E in terms of x, since x are members of the natural counting numbers, if we take on the first instance of x, wherein x is equal to 1, then plugging 1 in this formula, 2 times 1 gives us 2, which is exactly the first element of the set of even integers. Now, the same goes if we let x equal to 2, then 2 times 2 gives us 4. That would be the second element of E, and so on. Now, if we have doing the same for set O, we could also define equally for the representation for the odd integers. We can have that as 2x minus 1, wherein x here is also the elements in the natural set of the set of natural counting numbers. So again, if we instantiate it using the first instance for x equal to 1, plugging it in the expression 2x minus 1, that would give us 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 gives us 1, which is exactly the first instance or first element of set O. Now, if we let x equal to 2, that would be 2 times 2, 4, minus 1, that gives us 3, which is the second odd integer in the set O. And we proceed and so on as we include all the values for x and define O as such. Now, set D can be defined as small letter d, such that d is an integer that is less than 10, not including 10, but greater than or equal to 0. So of course, this rule includes all of the digits from 0 up to 9. Now, set W, if we let W equal to small letter w, such that W is the day of the week. Now, lastly, set P, which is the set of all distinct letters in the word Philippines. What we have done here is that we have listed down all the distinct letters in the word Philippines. So we have PHILNENS. Okay, so let's take on probably one example. For the rule method, given for example this expression here for the defined set, we have set of all x element of n such that x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. This set consists of those natural numbers satisfying the stated equation, x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. Now the question is, what are those natural numbers? Now, take note that x squared minus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0 is in the form of what we call a quadratic equation because of the x squared. Now, going back to your basic algebra, we know that the solution for a given quadratic equation, the solution for x is equal to negative b plus minus squared of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, the letters a, b, and c are the coefficients that appear in our given quadratic equation. In this case, our a is equal to 1, the one that appears besides x squared, so that is 1. B here, the coefficient b is the one that appears besides x. In this case, b is equal to negative 3. And c is the coefficient constant after after x squared and x. So in this case, our c is equal to 2. Now, identifying those and plugging that in the solution to the quadratic equation, then we arrive with this solution, and we have two possible answers, one coming from 3 plus 1 over 2, that would be 4 divided by 2, that gives us 2. And the other one is 3 minus 1 is divided by 2, 3 minus 1 is 2 divided by 2, that gives us 1. Therefore, the solution for the quadratic equation is either x is equal to 1 or x is equal to 2. And we denote this in a given set by simply writing down the solution 1 and 2 in our curly brackets. Okay, I'll be skipping set B, example B and example C, since these two are the same as the one that I presented for set E and set O in the previous illustration. Okay, so let's now proceed with what we call the universal set. The universal set is a defined set which includes all the possible elements of that set, and we call this the universal set, denoted by the symbol capital letter U. The elements of a universal set can be defined by either roster, or if it is convenient, or if it is inconvenient to list down all the elements of the given set, then we can alternately use the rule method instead. Now, again, making use of the previous illustration, let us try to identify whether each of this given set is either a universal set or a simple ordinary set. Now take note, for the first set L is the set of all letters in the English alphabet. Since obviously, clearly set L can be considered as a universal set since it contains all possible elements for the given property, all letters of the English alphabet. All other sets smaller than L is a proper subset of L. Thus, we have V, which is the set of vowels of the English alphabet, which has a smaller number of elements as compared to L. And V is a subset of L, where L can be considered as a universal set. The same goes with the set of consonants and the set of distinct letters in the word Philippines. Now, for the rest of the sets in the given, similarly, set E, set O, set D can be part of a more general set of numbers and thus taken as subsets of a wider set. Set W, on the other hand, has to be taken into context before deciding whether to take it as a universal set or part of a wider set. Okay, so let's now define what we call a null set. There can be a set with no elements. A set without elements is called an empty set or a null set, and this is denoted by this symbol. Or if we try to make use of the set builder notation, simply the null set or the empty set would be represented by the curly brackets used to represent the set without any elements inside. Okay, so let's now proceed with what we call the set operations. Set operations are methods of creating new sets from given ones based on the meaning of the words or, and not. Take note of the following mathematical notation. The symbol here represents the word or. The symbol here represents the word and, a sort of inverted B and inverted B and B, but do not confuse this with the letter D. Okay, this symbol here represents the word not. These operations are used conjunctively with the operations of the union, the intersection, and the complement, which will be discussed later. Okay, to start off with, let's start with the first operation that we call the union. Now, the union, given two sets, for example, A and B, the union of these sets, denoted by this symbol, A union B, is defined as the set whose elements are in A or in B. In symbols, the union of A and B is represented by X, such that X is an element of A or X is an element of B. This means that the values X is either an element of A or an element of B, or both. Okay, so perhaps to further illustrate what is meant by the union, we could take a few examples to illustrate this set operation. Now, example, if we let set A equal to the set containing the elements 1 and 2, set B containing the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4, set C containing the elements 1 and 5, set D containing the elements 3, 4, and 5, and set E containing the elements 4 and 5. then in this set of examples, we are asked to get the union between A and D. Now take note of the answer. The union between A and D is the set of elements, a set containing the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Therefore, given this example, what is meant from the definition that X is an element of A or X is an element of B means that simply to get the union between the two, we just list down all the elements or the combined elements of the two sets, wherein we have 1 and 2 as the elements of A and 3, 4, and 5 as the elements of D. Therefore, the union would be the combined, the set containing the combined elements of the two sets. Applying this definition for the second example, we have A union C. A union C, we have the elements 1, 2, and 1, 5. Writing the set of elements in the union of the sets, we have 1, 2, and 5. Now take note the difference from example 1. What we have done here is that we have a common element 1 that appears both in A and C. That means whenever we encounter such common elements between the two sets being taken, the union between them, we just list down once the common elements between the given sets. Now example number 3, we have A union B. A union B is equal to simply B. Why is that so? Because we have A as the elements 1 and 2, B as 1, 2, 3, and 4, since it was mentioned earlier that common elements, in this case 1 and 2, should appear once only in the new set or the union of the two sets. Therefore, the union between A and B would be the set containing the elements 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is exactly B. Okay, so let's have number 4. That would be D union E. That is equal to D because D is 3, 4, and 5, and E is 4 and 5. Since 4 and 5 are common elements, therefore the union between these two would be the set containing 3, 4, and 5 as its elements, which is exactly D. Now obviously, following the same set of ideas, we can answer number 5 as A union A equal to A. Okay, so lastly we have example number 6, but before we proceed with that example, let's try to consider the rest of the definition for the union. Now, for example, if we define A sub I, wherein I is what we call the index, which are simply the numbers 1, 2, 3, and so on, the members of the natural counting numbers, then the members of A sub I are A sub 1, A sub 2, A sub 3, and so on. Now, we let A sub I be a collection of sets whose union is to be taken provided by this symbol. You have a large symbol for the union for all the members of A sub I, which is simply stating that we continuously take the union of all the members of this collection of sets. So meaning you have A sub 1, union A sub 2, union A sub 3, up to union A sub n. Now in example number 6, for example, A sub 1 is equal to the set A sub 2 is B, A sub 3 is C, A sub 4 is D, A sub 5 is E. Taking this operation of the continuous union, then we can have the union from A sub 1 up to A sub 5 as the union between A, B, C, D, and E. And obviously, this result is equal to the set containing the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, let's proceed with the next set operation, the intersection. Now, the intersection of two sets A and B, which is denoted by this symbol, it is the same symbol for the union, but it is now inverted, is defined as the set whose elements are in A and in B. So if X is an element of the intersection, then X is an element of A and X is an element of B. Doing the same for if we have a collection of sets a sub 1 up to a sub I, then a continuous intersection between this collection of sets would be a sub 1 intersection a sub 2 up to a sub n. Now let's try to take a few examples. What the examples that appears here is the same set of examples that we have used in the earlier example for the union. So let's try to answer the following. We have B intersection D. So since the idea of the intersection is that the intersection is simply the set of all common elements of the two sets, therefore between set B and set D, the common elements between these two are the elements 3 and 4, and those the elements 3 and 4 would be exactly the elements of the intersection between B and D. Okay, so number 2, we have A intersection C. Between A and C, the only common element is the element 1. Now, containing this in our curly brackets, that would be our answer for the intersection between A and C. Intersection between D and E is simply equal to E. 3, 4, and 5. 4 and 5, the common elements is 4 and 5. 4 and 5 is exactly our set E. Now, number 4, this would be self-explanatory. The element of B intersection B is itself. Now let's try to have number 5. We have A intersection D, which is equal to a null set. So why is that so? Take a look at set A. We have the elements 1 and 2. Set D, on the other hand, we have 3, 4, and 5. They have no common elements. Therefore, the only intersection between these two sets is the empty set or the null set. Okay, so number 6, we have a sub 1 is equal to a sub 2 is equal to B, a sub 3 is equal to C. We get the continuous intersection between these three sets. Now, you could verify this on your own, that the result of this continuous intersection is the set containing the element 1. Well, obviously, between A, B, and C, the only common elements among these three sets is the element 1. Therefore, we have the set containing 1 as an element would be the answer for the continuous intersection. Now, as for number 7, the intersection of the 5 sets would be an empty set. Okay, what appears here in the next discussion would be the sum theorems. So we'll not be going through the details of the proof for this theorem. I'll be asking you to go through the proofs on your own and try to understand these proofs so that you could somehow understand why is each of these statements in the theorem is true. So, for example, why is it that the intersection between A and B be a smaller or an improper subset of A? So, the proof is stated here. The proof for number 2, the proof for number 3, and finally the proof for number 4. Okay, so again, for discussion purposes, we just take note of the following theorems, and perhaps in the future, if we are able to make use of these theorems in order to simplify sets, or in order to understand sets and set operations, we need not actually create a proof just to prove that these statements are true. Okay, so let's now proceed with the third operation, set operation. We have the complement. Okay, so given a set A, where A is an improper subset of the universal of a certain universal set, then the complement of a given set A, denoted by A raised to C, is the set of all elements in the universal set, but not an element of the set A. So what is meant by the operation complement is actually, or what is meant by this statement here is actually the set of all elements that is outside A. Given a set A, which is a subset of U, the complement of A is simply the set of all elements outside A but inside the universal set. Okay, so I am assuming that is clear. Now let's take on the next definition. We have the relative complement. So the relative complement is actually a sort of representation of the operation of the subtraction. But let's go through the detailed definition of the relative complement. So we have two sets, A and B. Then the relative complement of B with respect to A, denoted by this symbol. Again, this is read as the relative complement of B with respect to A, is given by the set of all elements X such that X is an element of A, but X is not an element of B. Or simply, this statement can be represented by the symbol. The relative complement of B with respect to A is equal to A intersection B complement. Okay, so perhaps we could make use of examples just to illustrate what is meant by the operation of the relative complement. So again, let's have the same set of examples previously used. We try to answer 1 to 5. We have the first one, the relative complement of D with respect to B. Applying the definition for this example, what is meant by the relative complement is that you take notice of the elements of D, 3, 4, and 5, and with respect to the elements of B, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the answer for the relative complement is simply the set of elements of D that does not appear in the set of elements of B. Again, what is meant by this statement of the relative complement is that in this example is that the set of elements in D that does not appear in the set of elements of B. In this case, the only element in D that does not appear in B is the element 5. Therefore, 5 would be the answer for the relative complement of D with respect to B. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Now, applying the same for number 2, we have the relative complement of C with respect to A. So, C with respect to A, the set of elements in C that is not present in A is the element 5. So, therefore, 5 would be the answer for the relative complement of C with respect to A. Okay, so that's sub number 3. We have E, the relative complement of E with respect to D. So E has 4 and 5 as its elements. D has 3, 4, and 5 as its elements. Now, since both of the elements of E, 4, and 5 appears in set D, therefore the only conclusion that we can have here is that the only thing that is what appears as the difference between these two is the empty set or the null set. Now, applying the same for the relative complement of B with itself, obviously that would also be a null set. And lastly, number 5, the relative complement of D with respect to A. D has 3, 4, 5 as its elements, and A has 1 and 2. Again, applying the definition, the relative complement of D are those elements in D that does not appear in A. So in this case, the elements in D that does not appear in A are all the elements 3, 4, and 5, which is exactly D. Okay, so let's try to consider the following theorems also. Take note of the equality of this operations. So you have the relative complement of B union C with respect to A. What happens here is that if you're going to distribute the operation of the relative complement between B and C and splitting B and C, what happens is that once you have distributed the relative complement, the operation of the union becomes an intersection and vice versa. The operation of intersection becomes the union. Again, I will not be going through the detailed proof, but I am expecting that you will be going through the steps of the proof in order for you to understand why is that true, why is the statement in the theorems true. This would be the proof for the first theorem. This would be the proof for the second theorem. Okay, for the next one, we have A, an improper subset of A. A is equal to B if and only if A is a proper subset. A is a subset of B and B is a subset of A. Number 3, if A is a subset of B and B is a subset of C, then A is a subset of C. We call number 3 as the transitive property. Number 4, for any set S, the null set is always a subset of S. Okay, just like before, I will not be going through the proofs, but I am expecting that you will go through the steps of the proofs in order for you to prove on your own that the following statements in this theorem are true. Okay, so next will be the De Morgan's laws. The De Morgan's laws, for example, if you have every set B and set C, then the De Morgan's law states that the union between these two, if you take the complement of the union, what De Morgan says is that you can distribute the complement to both B and C, but after doing that, you have to invert the operation of the union into the intersection and vice versa. If you have B intersection C complement, then distributing the complement to both C and B reverses the operation of the intersection into the union. Now, as for the proof of this one, we have the following statements for the first De Morgan law and the second De Morgan law. Okay, so next would be disjoint and pairwise disjoint sets. So suppose we have a set A and set B, and they are said to be disjoint. What is meant that they are disjoints, or these two sets are disjoint, is that the intersection between these two is a null set. Disjoint means that both the sets A and B have no common elements. Okay, so if we're going to extend the definition of disjoint sets into a collection of sets, for example, A sub I and A sub j, wherein A sub I and J are natural counting numbers and I is not equal to J, so meaning the collection of sets in I are different from the collection of sets in J. Then if we're going to get the pairwise disjoint of the two sets, that means every pair formed by the collection of sets in A sub I and A sub j, they would have no intersection at all. The only intersection between pairwise disjoint sets would be an empty set or a null set. Okay, so let's try to illustrate this concept using the following examples. A sub I would be the set of even integers. A sub 2 would be the set of odd integers. And A sub 3 would be the set of numbers 3, 6, 9, 12, which are multiples of 3. Now, sets A sub 1 and A sub 2 are said to be pairwise disjoint since A sub 1, the intersection of A sub 1 and A sub 2 is a null set. That means the A sub 1 and A sub 2 have no common elements. And this is quite obvious since the set A sub 1 has even integers and A sub 2 has odd integers. Therefore, they are said to be pairwise disjoint since they have no common elements. but the collection of set A sub I, meaning if you're going to get the continuous intersection between A sub 1, A sub 2, and A sub 3, this collection of sets are said to be not pairwise disjoint, since the intersection of these three is not equal to a null set. Since A sub 2 and A sub 3 have common elements, the same goes with A sub 1 and A sub 3. Okay, so next we have finite and infinite sets. A set S is said to be finite if it is either empty or it has countable n elements, where n is an element of the natural counting number. Otherwise, if the set S is not finite, then it is said to be infinite. Now, recall in our previous illustration the sets L, V, C, W, D, and P. If we're going to try to identify whether these sets are finite or infinite, we know that sets L, V, C, W, and D, as well as P, are finite sets, while sets E and O are infinite sets. Okay, so cardinality of sets. The cardinality of S, denoted by n of S, this is read as n of S, is simply the number of elements of S. So, for example, in our illustration, the sets L, V, C, W, D, P, E, and O, obviously, we have the following cardinality: the set of all letters in the English alphabet. The cardinality of n of L is equal to 26. The cardinality of the set of vowels is 5. The cardinality of the set of consonants is 21. Since sets E and set O are infinite, their cardinalities are infinity. The number of days in the week is 7. The number of digits from 0 to 9 is 10. And the number of distinct letters in the word Philippines is equal to 7. Okay. Let's define now what we call power sets. A power set of S, denoted by P of S, is the set of all subsets of S. The number of elements, or the cardinality of P of S, is given by this expression, 2 to the n of S. Now let's try to illustrate this one given an example. Suppose we have S as equal to the set containing the elements A, B, and C. Find the power set of S. Now, to get the power set of S, again, the definition says that the power set of S is the set of all subsets of S. This means that we are required to identify all the subsets of S and contain all those subsets in a set, and that set to be formed by all the subsets, we call that the power set of S. Now, the question is, how many subsets does the power set have? Now, based on the definition, the cardinality, or the number of elements of P of S, or the power set of S, is given by 2 to the n of S. Now, since n of S is 3, then that would be 2 to the n of S would be 2 to the 3, that would be equal to 8. 8 represents the number of subsets of the power set of S. In which case, the power set of S would be this set. The first subset of S is the set containing all 3 elements. Next would be the set containing only 2 elements. So we have the following combination: AB, AC, and BC. Next would be the subsets containing 1 element. So we have A, B, and C. And finally, the null set. So these are the number of subsets is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so next in our discussion is Venn diagrams. A Venn diagram is simply a pictorial representation of sets by set of points on a plane. The universal set is normally represented by a large rectangle, and disc or circles lying within the rectangle represents any subsets of U. Now, for example, given sets A, B, and C, let's try to illustrate the following using Venn diagrams. Number 1, A and B have elements in common. A and B are said to have elements in common. That means they have an intersection, and the intersection is represented by an overlap between the drawings for representing set A and set B. Now, this overlap here in between A and B, the points that would appear in this overlap would represent those elements that are common to both A and B. The second condition is B and C have elements in common, and the third condition is that A and C are disjoint. Again, disjoint means that A and C have no common elements. Therefore, in order to illustrate these three conditions using Venn diagrams, we have the following illustration. A and B have common elements, so therefore they have an overlap. B and C have common elements, so therefore the drawing should have an overlap. A and C are disjoint, so therefore they are separated in a way that they have no overlap. All the three subsets A, B, and C should be contained in a rectangle, wherein the rectangle here represents the universal set. Okay, so I will not be going through the details of each, but I'm expecting that you will be looking at each of them in order for you to understand why is it that the illustration for the Venn diagrams would be the following. As for the shaded portion, the shaded portion are those elements that represents the answer for what is asked here in the illustration. So, for example, if you have number 2, what is asked here is you will get the union between a set A and the intersection between B and C. Now, since B and C are of priority, since they are written down inside parentheses, so taking the intersection between B and C using Venn diagrams, then those elements in the intersection would be the shaded portion in between B and C. Now, since that is taken with the union between A, then therefore the combined combination of the union between A and the intersection B and C would be the shaded portion between these two. Note that this representation doesn't tell us anything about whether A is disjoint with B or A is disjoint with C, but simply it is simply stating that the union would be the combined elements of the intersection between B and C and A. Okay, so lastly, for the last part of the discussion would be the Cartesian product. Okay, so given two sets A and B, the Cartesian product of A and B denoted by A cross B is the set A cross B is the set of ordered pairs A and B, wherein A is an element of A and B is an element of B. So basically, what is meant by A cross B, or the Cartesian product within A and B, is you're going to create ordered pairs between the elements of set of the first set, crossing it with the elements of the second set. Okay, so to illustrate this one, let us consider A sub 1 having the elements 1 and 2. Set A sub 2 having the elements 2 and 4. Therefore, the Cartesian product between A sub 1 and A sub 2 is 1, 2, 1, 4, 2, 2, and 2, 4. Each of this combination will be written inside a parenthesis, forming the ordered pair A and B, and having to list down all these ordered pairs in the curly brackets representing the set of the Cartesian product between the set A sub 1 cross A sub 2. Okay, so for the rest of the definition, If you have any number of a collection of sets a sub 1 up to a sub n, then simply the Cartesian product between a sub 1 up to a sub n is the combination of elements between a sub 1, a sub 2, a sub 3, and a sub n. You just extend the definition for any number of collection of sets in a sub I. Okay, so this ends our discussion on sets and set operations.